Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 8. We are so excited about today's episode, but before we get into it, we have a little request that we want to ask you guys. So any ratings, reviews that you guys give us help us so much. So whatever platform you are currently listening on, while you listen to us ramble in this intro, if you would ever so kindly consider leaving us a review or a rating, we would really appreciate it because it really helps us. And if you guys have any feedback on the podcast at all, you can always DM us on Instagram or TikTok at soculturedpodcast, or you can leave a comment if you are listening on Spotify. I love reading everybody's comments on Spotify, and I feel like more people are starting to use them. And I love that because it's so interesting, like hearing people's thoughts. And I feel like people always comment on our intro chats, like whatever we're talking about in the intro. If we're talking about the gym, Christmas, like people always comment about that. And I love
it.
reading them. So yeah, if you guys have any feedback at all or just anything you want to say to us, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review or anything like that. And also, if you guys have any ideas for future seasons, episodes, anything that you guys want to hear us talk about, you can also let us know those. Specifically, our season Overlooked, which was season 6, was your guys' idea. Like, you guys were asking us for that so much. So we definitely do listen to your thoughts and take them on board. So any ideas for seasons, let us know, because obviously we've only got 8, 9, 10. We've got 3 episodes left of this season, and then we're moving on to a completely different theme. So if you guys have any thoughts, feelings, opinions on what season 8 should be, then now is the time for you to let us know.
Yeah, we always say that we always forget to ask you guys to drop us like a little subscribe or a follow or a rating. So yeah, this is one of our New Year's resolutions to actually get you guys as solid listeners for the future. I mean, if we cast our minds back to like Spotify Wrapped, we do get one for the podcast, and 2025 was such a good year for us. So obviously we want to make 2026 even better. So if you can help us get us there, then obviously it will mean a lot.
We're just 2 STEM girlies trying to make it.
We're just trying. That's what's
guys. It's in our episode descriptions. We are just 2 STEM girlies trying to make it. No, but for real. And if you have any friends that you think would enjoy this podcast, like, send it to them. You should totally send this to like your lab bestie, and you guys can discuss the laboraTEA. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So share it with a friend, someone that you think would love the pod, and we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, and obviously we're back wearing our t-shirts this week. Obviously let us know what you guys are thinking in terms of merch, whether you would like merch, what sort of merch would you want. Would you want a t-shirt? Would you want a jumper? Would you want a mug? Would you want stickers? Let us know, because I mean, we've made mugs, jumpers, and t-shirts for ourselves, and mugs for our listeners as well. So I personally love my little So Cultured mug. I keep it on my desk. So if you've seen like either our contents or like some of our followers have or listeners have the mugs as well, because they came to an event that we held. We love seeing that. So that's kind of what's prompted us to maybe make some merch, because people have expressed their interest, and we also love seeing your little So Cultured merch as well. So let us know what you guys would want, because obviously that is a New Year's resolution.
I think we should do some stickers and just infiltrate all of the labs. Like, just put stickers on everything. Put it on the -80, put it on, I don't even know what else. Put it on the autoclave, put it on everything. Just So Cultured everywhere. Stickers would be cute. It. Anyway, that is enough for our e-begging this week. So for now, let's get into the rest of the episode. Welcome to the So Cultured podcast,
where we explore science and tech unfiltered.
We're your hosts, Liv and Taz, 2 girls who love STEM and spilling the tea.
Each season, we take on a new theme, whether it's busting conspiracy theories, celebrating women in STEM, or breaking down the science in your favourite sci-fi films.
And of course, in every episode, we spill the laboraTEA,
where we share your wildest stories from the world of science.
Let's get into this week's episode of So Cultured.
Okay, so today we are talking about something that seems like it could be straight from a sci-fi movie. So imagine this. you fall gravely ill, and instead of dying, you're actually placed in a frozen sleep. So decades, maybe even centuries later, scientists thaw you out. They cure your illness and you walk again among living, reborn into a future world. Now, this isn't just the plot of science fiction, it's actually a dream that inspired one of the most fascinating and controversial scientific ideas in history. And that idea is cryonics. So just before we proceed, in this series, every episode has basically required some form of trigger warning, and obviously this episode is not any different. So full disclaimer, we will be covering topics surrounding death and the process of dying. So if you feel particularly sensitive or affected by this topic, then feel free to skip this episode or proceed to the episode with care.
Oh my God, I am so excited about this episode because I feel like we always see like cryonics in sci-fi films, like, you know, when people are just like floating around. Do you know what it reminds me of is like Futurama wasn't cryonics, but you know, like Futurama where they're all in like the tanks is kind of what it's like reminding me
No,
of. But
it
I've definitely
is.
seen is it cryonics in Futurama?
It's like the idea of like a suspended animation, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, I find it very interesting, but I really don't know anything about cryonics, so I am so intrigued. So, yeah, tell me more. I'm so excited.
I know, it's like such a weird concept. So I'm going to first take you back to August the 28th, 2014, and the Alcor Life Extension Foundation is preparing to receive a new client. Now, it's not a patient, but a client, because the person arriving today is already legally dead. But unlike the usual post-mortem journey toward a burial or cremation, this body is headed somewhere very different. Alcor's staff are preparing it for preservation, a process that they believe might allow this individual to be revived in a far technologically advanced future. So among tanks of liquid nitrogen lie people suspended in hope that death might one day be reversible. So the person arriving today is a guy called 𝗾𝘂𝗶𝘁. He was a respected computer engineer and one of the earliest adopters of cryptocurrency. So 𝗾 died from complications of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS for short, but instead of being laid to rest, his body is being preserved in liquid nitrogen for a future that may or may not come. So, could raising the dead be an actual possibility? So, some critics call it pseudoscience, arguing that no one's ever been revived and that the industry actually just sells hope without any evidence. But some supporters call it a long shot bet on the future. So, whatever you think, cryonics has carved out a lasting place in scientific imagination.
Wait, I feel like I'm a bit stupid right now because this is not like a made up science, like something that people are thinking about doing, like people are actually doing this.
People are actually doing this, yeah.
Wait,
Which
how did
we'll
I not
delve
know that?
into later. Yeah.
I thought it was just kind of like a made up thing and like an idea that it wasn't actually. So there's genuinely people who have like frozen themselves.
Yeah.
Oh my God, wait, I feel a bit dumb now because I'm like, maybe I should have realized because people do crazy stuff, like people are doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So I guess it's not that surprising, but I am really surprised. Okay, now I'm even more excited for this episode because yeah, maybe before I get too ahead of myself though, how did this even start? I don't know. I'm intrigued. And like, I have so many questions. So many questions. I'm gonna let you talk. Let's go to how it all originated.
Honestly, it's a whole process, but obviously, let's just start at the beginning because obviously that makes the most sense. So we're going back to July the 26th, 1919 in
Oh
Letchworth,
wow, that's
Hertfordshire.
early.
A
Okay.
long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, I was expecting you to say like 20 something, 1919. Intriguing.
So on July the 26th, 1919, James Lovelock, who is now known as kind of one of cryonics' earliest kind of scientific influences, was born. So his family later moved to London, where James attended Strand School. So with a modest family income, university initially wasn't an option. So he worked in a photography company while studying at Birkbeck College in the evenings. And eventually he saved enough to attend the University of Manchester to study chemistry. Now, during his studies, World War II actually erupted, and Lovelock Lovelock actually wasn't enlisted due to his religious beliefs, and instead he contributed through scientific research, which included studying the effects of sunburn on soldiers stationed in hot climates. Now, after the war, he earned a PhD in medicine from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and he began working at the National Institute for Medical Research. And it was there that he would stumble into the world of cryopreservation. So, in the early 1950s, James began looking into the field of cryopreservation, so how freezing affects organic material. So, this is a process that is more destructive than most people imagine, because whilst freezing like last night's curry is fairly trivial, freezing the delicate structures of cells is not, because the water inside those cells expands into ice crystals, which can tear cell membranes apart. So, to understand why freezing is so destructive, let's take a brief tour into cryobiology, which is the science of how low temperatures can affect living systems. So, at extremely low temperatures, biological activity slows drastically, and below minus 130 degrees Celsius, cellular activity essentially stops entirely. Theoretically, a human cooled to this temperature could be preserved indefinitely, but the real challenge isn't cooling a body, it's preventing the catastrophic damage along the way. So if we take a single human cell, for example, as temperatures drop, ice crystals begin forming inside and outside the cell. And as water freezes, solutes can no longer dissolve properly. So this leads to extreme concentration imbalances and a destructive process called osmotic shock, where water essentially tears the cell apart. And without protection, a human cell essentially stands no chance of this freezing process.
Interesting. I would never had thought about the fact that ice crystals could be the problem. I would, never ever heard about. Then again, I didn't even know cryonics was like an actual thing. So I guess I've never really thought that deeply about it. That's so interesting. So, I mean, obviously, like I just said, we now know that cryonics is actually a thing. So they must have found a way to overcome this problem with the ice crystals, right?
Yeah. So I get a bit more into depth later, but obviously we do now freeze cells in the lab. So this is definitely something that we can do, but obviously freezing an entire human body is a bit more controversial, and I'll touch on that later. But Lovelock wasn't actually the first person to explore this area, so it wasn't this like novel idea. And actually, the idea of suspended animation like we see now in sci-fi films has existed in folklore as far back as the 500s. But in 1953, Lovelock actually published a paper called The Hemolysis of Human Red Blood Cells by Freezing and Thawing. And he actually found that electrolyte concentration, so the concentration of salts, was responsible for cellular damage during freezing. And meanwhile, across the pond, history was actually being made, because by 1954, 3 healthy babies were born from previously frozen human sperm, and these were the first births that occurred in this way in the world. So the dream of kind of freezing life and reviving it was slowly becoming scientifically plausible, obviously in a completely different way, but this was the process that was happening. And this was actually all made possible by Lovelock's colleague, Audrey Smith. She worked with Sir Alan Parkes and Christopher Polge in the late 1940s and early 1950s to try and create a reliable method for freezing animal semen. And basically they kept failing, except for one really strange success. Audrey, she achieved a really promising result in one of her experiments using albumin, but oddly she couldn't reproduce it at all, and she was so confused as to why she managed to do it, but then when she tried to do it again, failed. So she returned to her original bottle that she used during her successful run, since obviously every attempt after that with a different bottle had failed. But just as she revisited it, the bottle was accidentally dropped, and some of the liquid splashed onto a hot plate, releasing a sharp, acrid puff of smoke. And Audrey actually realized and immediately recognized the smell as acrolein, which is a compound released released when glycerol burns. And she realized that must be it, because she didn't think that she was working with a bottle of glycerol. She thought she was working with albumin. So it was
Ooh,
completely by accident that she used
wow.
this glycerol stock. And what she found is when she then went back to this glycerol stock or used glycerol in the future, it consistently protected cells from freezing damage. And this chance discovery formed an important milestone in cryopreservation and became a breakthrough for freezing many cell types, including sperm.
My God, now that is a good accident to have in the lab. Our
Mm-hmm.
listener from last week, the Western blot, like they needed something like this to happen to them. Like they
Yeah,
just accidentally used the right antibody. That's insane. Like that is
yeah.
luck if I've ever heard it. That's so cool. How does glycerol actually work then? Like how come that works over albumin, for example?
Yeah, so glycerol is something we call a cryoprotectant. So they're chemicals that dissolve into water and essentially lower its freezing point and create large unfrozen pockets within the cells that then protect the cells from the crystallization damage that usually occurs, right? And nature actually has already figured out similar tricks. So in nature, you can find some cold tolerant fish, which basically produce antifreeze proteins, another version of cryoprotectants that can stop ice from forming altogether. There's also freeze tolerant frogs that can survive when
Oh my
up to
gosh.
70% of their body water turns to ice, and they're protected by biochemical agents that stabilize their cells, similar to glycerol. And also some insects produce sugar molecules which can stabilize their cells as well. And obviously none of these organisms provided a complete blueprint for humans, but they help scientists build technologies that we use in medicine today.
That's so interesting. I feel like fish are really cool. Did anyone attempt to freeze and revive like an animal specifically or like a mammal?
Yes, so James Lovelock actually did. So in 1956, he and Audrey Smith, who I just mentioned, published studies on golden hamsters during cooling to and rewarming the body from temperatures below 0 degrees Celsius. So their goal was very simple but quite radical, and that was to determine how much of a brain could freeze while still allowing the animal to survive. And shockingly,
Interesting.
1/3 of the hamsters lived even when 60% of the water in their brains had frozen.
Wow.
But while their brains tolerated this mild freezing, other organs didn't really fare as well, which was an early sign of the complexity that cryonics would then face.
That is so cute. It's like the fact that they're called golden hamsters as well. I don't know why. That just like makes them even cuter.
Don't you think it's wild though how they were just like, oh, this experiment is just gonna involve us freezing some hamsters to like around 0 degrees and then seeing if they survive it? Like that is
Yeah,
messed up.
it is messed up, but that's why you're doing an episode on it, right? In this series, because
Yeah,
I mean, one thing this series has taught me is that scientists do some crazy shit and a lot of time
yeah.
with no real scientific basis. At least I feel like in this episode there is some scientific basis. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like
Yeah.
they weren't just like they didn't just grab a hamster and was like, yeah, let me just shove this in the freezer and see what happens. Like
Look,
there
this
is
kind of
actually
work led to like being able to freeze sperm and freeze eggs for
yeah,
IVF and things like that. So like obviously something good has come out of it, but yeah, it is pretty wild.
it is. How do you make the jump from like hamsters to humans as well? Like, do you know what I mean? Like how did that happen?
Yeah, so that brings me along to a guy called Robert Ettinger, and he was kind of known as the father of cryonics.
Oh, that's such a badass name, isn't it? Like, oh
I
yeah, like
know,
I'm the
the
father of
father.
cryonics.
I know, it sounds
I want to
so
be the mother
cool.
of cryonics.
No, literally. But he was the man who basically transformed cryopreservation from like a biological curiosity into essentially a human centered movement. So, at just 12 years old, his fascination began with a 1931 sci fi story called The Jameson Satellite, featured in an issue of Amazing Stories. In the story, a future race of machine men finds a professor whose frozen body has been orbiting Earth for 40 million years, and they place his preserved brain into a mechanical body and basically revive him. And this idea stuck with Oettinger for decades. In his teens and 20s, Oettinger fought in World War II, and he was severely wounded in Germany. And this experience deeply shaped his thinking about mortality, and he was still kind of carrying that childhood idea that death might not have to be final. So by the early 1960s, at age 42, he decided to make the scientific argument no one else had. So his book, The Prospect of Immortality, laid out the radical idea that dying is a gradual process, not an instant one, and that freezing someone at low temperatures might preserve enough structure for future medicine to repair. When this book was published in 1964, science fiction legend Isaac Asimov endorsed this scientific logic, and overnight Oettinger became a media phenomenon. He appeared on major TV shows and in magazines around the world, and just like that, the modern cryonics movement was born. So whilst this movement was gaining traction, science and imagination were actually converging, because during the same period, in 1963, cryobiologist 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗯 proposed the freezing rate theory, that freezing damage could be minimized by freezing tissue at 1 degrees Celsius per minute, and when combined with cryoprotectants like glycerol. So the stage was basically set for the first frozen human.
That's so interesting. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Like how if you have like a bunch of people together who believe in something, it can kind of end up taking off as a scientific field. So obviously now I know that cryonics is actually a thing, and like people do actually do this. Who was the first ever person to be froze? Because like on episode 1 of this series we spoke about head transplants, and who was the first person who was going to go for a head transplant? So like I'm curious, in this case, who was the first person who was like, yeah, go on, freeze me?
Well, it's actually like more of an intricate story than you think. So
okay,
Oettinger, his book, like you said, sparked this movement, and it sparked the creation of several American cryonics companies, including his own, the Cryonics Institute, and obviously the Immortalitist Society, which are organizations that are still active today, by the way. And he actually spent more than 30 years building public awareness, community infrastructure, and practical protocols for preservation. So Cryocare Equipment Corporation were actually the first to cryopreserve a human, and the first human preserved remains unknown. But in April 1966, a recently embalmed middle-aged woman from Los Angeles was placed in liquid nitrogen and frozen, and then she was stored slightly above freezing temperature in a mortuary refrigerator for a year before being thawed and buried. And in my mind, that's not really true cryonics, because like she was already embalmed, and it was 2 months after her death that they decided to freeze her in liquid nitrogen, and then she kind of like thawed out and then was buried. And nobody knows who she is either. So I'm like, was that a legit
did that even
claim?
happen?
Who even knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first true cryonics patient actually arrived the following year, and his name was James Hiram Bedford, and he was a psychology professor, and he died on January the 12th, 1967 from metastatic kidney cancer. And in his will, he requested his corpse to be cryogenically preserved and looked after, and he even wrote in a $100,000 payment to be donated to cryonics. And within 2 hours of his death, scientists actually began injecting his body with a mixture of dimethyl sulfoxide and Ringer's solution. But by today's standards, this technique was kind of crude and likely failed to preserve his brain. But still, Bedford became the first person in history to be cryogenically frozen, with the explicit hope of future revival. And his body passed through several facilities as companies basically collapsed around him, including the disastrous Chatsworth incident. So in 1969, a man called Robert Nelson, who was a TV repairman turned cryonics operator, which fills you with so
random
much hope.
career switch.
He crammed 4 bodies into a capsule designed for one and lowered it into an underground vault in Chatsworth, California. But basically, when families fell behind on payments to Robert Nelson, he stopped refilling the liquid nitrogen, and basically it turned out that 7 bodies thawed and unfortunately decomposed. And in 1981, a court case found Nelson liable for nearly $1 million. But Bedford's body, luckily, by some miracle, was not one of the Chatsworth victims, and he eventually ended up at Alcor, where he remains today, and he is still the longest preserved cryonics patient in history. But this chaos kind of highlighted a core issue, which is cryonics patients rely entirely on long-term financial stability and the ethical behavior of their storage facility. So whilst Bedford's kind of preservation was primitive, and it's probably unlikely that the preservation worked to keep his brain intact, it marked the true beginning of human cryonics. And since the early 1970s, cryonics has actually made improvements with newer methods of preservation.
It's so interesting. I never really thought as well about, like the long-term financial side of things. And then also, say this really picked up and like everybody wanted to do it, it's like, where are we going to keep all these people? It's almost like the life cycle is like, you depend on, this is really like morbid, but you depend on people like disappearing almost. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like nobody dies today and like their bodies just stay on Earth. Like soon there's not going to be enough space on Earth for all of these people.
Too many people. I
almost feel 100%. Like now I'm kind of looking at cryonics in a different way. It's obviously, I think the long-term goal for these people is they're going to wake up in like year 3000, everyone's going to be like flying around in the air, but it's like, who do you think that your great grandchildren are going to pay for you? If my great granddad has been preserved and they're like, Liv, you need to pay. Oh, get fucked. Sorry, that's so mean of me, but get rid of him. I hadn't really thought about that. So I think that's like an interesting concept of like, people are not going to pay. I don't know. No. Would you pay for like your great?
No, I mean, they've found ways around it now, but like, back then they were expecting people to pay like yearly. Maybe they just had too much like faith in science that it would advance so much in like such a short amount of time that they would just be able to revive someone.
But also, like, what are the preservation options available today then? Let's talk about
that. Okay, so you have 2 options of preservation, like 2 main options. One is preservation of your entire body, which is kind of what we've already spoken about, or the preservation of your brain, which is called neuropreservation. And obviously goes without saying that whole body preservation is more expensive, and neuropreservation appeals to those who believe that consciousness can someday be uploaded or transferred to a synthetic body, because obviously you'll have no body rather than your whole body being raised from the dead. And we already touched on it with the hamsters, but you're more likely to preserve the brain alone than the brain within the whole body. And this is because technology has advanced. So one really great leap in technological advancement was the use of vitrification, which is, we've already touched on it, it's the use of cryoprotectants when freezing, because it prevents the ice formation. But vitrification is actually very difficult. So those cryoprotectant agents can be really toxic at the concentrations required for whole organs. So to fully prevent ice, tissue must also be cooled extremely quickly and uniformly, which is something that's pretty easy with single cells, but a lot harder for complex water-rich organs or literally entire bodies. And even if vitrification succeeds, revival requires uniform rewarming. So any uneven heating can create ice crystals or even fractures within the tissue. Researchers have actually successfully vitrified and partially revived small structures such as corneas, heart valves, and tiny blood vessels, but nothing remotely close to a whole human body, which is another reason why it's probably more likely to be able to preserve a brain than a whole body.
That's so interesting. I feel like people listening to this will be like, what the hell? Like, this is so Black Mirror. We're never going to be able to upload consciousness, blah, blah, blah. But do you know what? I'm not completely shut down to the idea. To be honest, I mean, I am. We all know I love tech. But I don't know. I feel like you can't really begin to even imagine how much technology is going to advance in our lifetime, the next lifetime. Like, I'm not closed off to these things, to be honest. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting. But say I wanted to be, like, say today I'm like, right, I want to be cryopreserved, like that. That's how I want to go. What would, like, how do you even go about that? Do you know what I mean? Like, who do you go to? What do you do? Like, what is the process?
So one of the key features of cryonics is that it relies very heavily on predictable death. So most cryonics patients die from terminal illnesses because it allows for a standby team to wait nearby in the final days of life. Because obviously most countries don't allow for euthanasia. And this is like one of the main caveats to cryonics, is that no one has been frozen while still alive. They've died and then they've been frozen, which is like one of the biggest caveats, because not only are you having to like revive someone from the dead, but you're also having to like unfreeze them as well. So obviously most countries don't allow for euthanasia, so this requires a lot of waiting around for the standby team if you have a terminal illness, which undoubtedly adds to the cost, but we'll obviously come to that in a bit. So the moment that legal death occurs, the team can begin work, and the quicker the work, the more cells remain intact. So immediately after cardiac arrest, artificial circulation and breathing are restarted to reduce the damage to the brain and prevent the cells from being starved of oxygen. And then the cryoprotective chemicals are delivered intravenously. So after this, the body is then submerged in an ice water bath for transport to the cryonics facility, where more cryoprotectants are perfused into the body. And once they're at this facility, over about a week, the body is cooled to nearly minus 200 degrees Celsius and then stored in liquid nitrogen. So this effectively pauses the biological decay, but the scientific challenges remain enormous because there's no guarantee that no cells or organs have been completely damaged.
See, all of this is sounding expensive to me. I can't lie. It's all sounding expensive. I'm like, woo, my great grandchildren ain't paying for this. How, like, do we have a number? Do we actually know how much it costs? Surely we do.
Yeah, so there are companies that obviously offer this. So at 𝗾𝘂𝗲𝗀𝗃, which is like one of the main companies that offer like cryonic preservation, whole body cryopreservation starts at around $200,000, which includes $60,000 for the procedure, $25,000 into a membership fund, and then around $115,000.
Membership fund? What do I need a membership for? I'm dead, babe. I don't need to be a member of anything.
You pay that whilst you're still alive up until you die, and you also pay it after death. Basically, you have to put $115,000 into a trust, and that kind of like pays the mortgage of your like storage facility, and they essentially like invest that trust so that they can pay themselves $25,000 after that for like the long-term storage.
Oh, sorry. I'm paying all of that money for something that's not even been proven to work. Like, I don't even know that it works, and you want, that's insane.
I mean, this is the whole point of what is messed up about this, because obviously there's no evidence this ever worked. No cryonics patient has ever been revived. Like, they've not even been close to it. And cryobiologists argue that the damage caused during the freezing and then the thawing is obviously enormous, because patients aren't being preserved. They could be irreversibly damaged. From a biologist's perspective and a virologist, I've frozen viruses before, and they're obviously minuscule structures. And like even after one freeze thaw cycle, the titer of viable viruses there like drops so dramatically, which is why people grow up viral stocks and then aliquot them into smaller like amount, so that they don't have to like keep freezing and thawing the same stock, because your titer of virus just like depletes massively, and that's just like from freezing and thawing. So if it's like a tiny structure like a virus, you can only begin to imagine like what a whole body is going to do. Then you have some people, where some supporters of like cryonics argue that future nanotechnology could repair the damage that's been caused. But then obviously most scientists,
it's just a big what if, isn't it? Oh, what if they invent something?
It is like that's the whole point of cryonics, because
Yeah,
there's
true.
many ethical questions, like does it encourage premature euthanasia? Does it create false hope for grieving families? Does it distort our understanding of death? And even if retrieval becomes possible, you'd still have to cure whatever killed the person originally, because like I said, you managed to revive them from the dead, but that person was terminally ill when they died, so you're also going to have to cure a terminally ill patient if you manage to revive them. But I guess the big existential question remains, if you woke up in like probably centuries into the future, would you want to be there? Like, your loved ones are long gone, your culture could be extinct, your world is unrecognizable. Like, imagine bringing someone back from 1800s into today, the age of smartphones, TikTok, like now multiply that by another like 100 years. I don't know, I'm personally conflicted, because I reckon it would be so cool to be like, obviously in the 2000s 1 second, and then the next second you're like 2500 or 3000. But like realistically, it would be sad leaving everyone you know behind. Let us know what you think in the comments, what you would do. Like, if you were given the opportunity to do this and you were like guaranteed that it would work, like, would you do it? Like, what would you do, Liv?
Oh God, I think it would depend if I was like terminally ill and you had all that money, then maybe, I don't know. But like, do you know what I'm thinking as well? Like, this is so selfish of me, but imagine you've got like a rich grandparent and you're thinking, right, yes, that inheritance is gonna hit pretty soon. Like, you've got all of these plans for it, and then granddad's like, oh no, I'm freezing myself.
I need
You'd
that
be
for the
livid.
future.
I don't know. Listen, if you've got the money, like, it is a what if, but I mean, I think it also depends. Religious people will have a very different outlook on this, right? So I think it really depends on like your views on what is life after death. What does life after death look like? Because, but then I guess it's like, you're not really, if you truly believe that it's going to work, like, you're not really stopping yourself from dying, because eventually it's not like, this doesn't make you immortal, right? Like, if you have a terminal illness and then you freeze yourself and then they wake you back up when there's a cure, they cure you, you're still going to eventually die of something else. So it's like, when does the cycle end? Do you continue to keep freezing yourself? Because if we all lived until like 110, don't they say like we'd all get Alzheimer's? So then it's like, well, then there might be a cure for Alzheimer's, I guess. But I don't know, maybe they'll figure out immortality.
I know, maybe they will.
I think just accept the natural cycle of life, me personally, and give that inheritance over.
I actually agree with you, but I think it's so interesting. There's so many documentaries on YouTube about people who have decided to like opt in. They're still alive today, but once they're on their deathbed, they've opted to be cryopreserved. And there was also a case of a young girl, I think she was probably either late teens or early 20s, and she got cancer, and basically her dream was to be cryopreserved so that she could like actually live a life in the future. And yeah, there's a whole like documentary on how she kind of appealed to the internet, and the internet paid her like GoFundMe, and her brain has been cryopreserved, because unfortunately she passed away from cancer. But yeah, her brain is being cryopreserved at the 𝗾𝘂𝗲𝗀 company that I spoke to you about. So yeah, if you're interested in that, you should definitely watch some documentaries on YouTube.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a different outlook, doesn't it, when you hear a story like that? Guys, let us know in the comments. I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I do as well. But let's return to 𝗾𝘂𝗁y. He was the first person ever cryopreserved. Will he ever wake up in the future? That is the biggest question, and we don't know, because science suggests that it's unlikely. But 𝗾𝘂𝗲 has learned from past disasters, and obviously it uses trusts and investments to maintain long-term stability, as well as like the technique used is completely changed over the years. But obviously cryonics is not recognized as a medical treatment, and it sits firmly on the border between speculative science and pseudoscience. And whether it's ethical may depend on how you view the value of hope, so the price people are willing to pay for it, essentially. And for many, cryonics is simply a way to cope with mortality. And despite the doubts, cryonics actually continues to heavily influence science fiction, from interstellar hibernation to time jumping narratives. And actually, around 200 to 500 people worldwide have been cryopreserved at 4 major organizations. So, like I said, there's a few documentaries of people who've decided to go down this route. So, definitely check them out if you're interested. And even Ettinger himself, who is known as the father of cryonics, was frozen in 2011 at the age of 92.
Interesting. I mean, he kind of had to, right? It's like, if you don't believe in it, why aren't you freezing yourself,
Of course, I agree.
This was so interesting. This was, I genuinely think, like my favorite episode of season 7. Yeah, I love this. I think this is it's such an interesting topic. Like, I'd love to just go to the pub and like discuss this topic. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those ones where you could talk about it for such a long time, and there's so many different points to think about. And yeah, it's so interesting. Thank you so much for this task.
It is so interesting. Also, it's morbid and it's dark curiosity, but it's not like too heavy hitting, you know?
Right, because it's like, it's the inevitable anyway. So it's up to any individual how they feel about this whole topic, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone's going to have their own individual personal thoughts. And I don't really think there's a right or a wrong.
No, I think it's difficult. Like, some people obviously choose to be buried, some people choose to be cremated, and some people, because they have the money, they're choosing to be cryopreserved just to see if they can be revived in the future, which, when you put it like that, it doesn't seem too bad. I think if you have like an opinion that's like, I've got the money, let's just see if it happens. If it doesn't happen, I'll be dead. If it does happen, great. But I think it's sad when like people pin their hope on it whilst they're still alive to like be able to.
But then it's like, where's the harm in that? Do you know what I mean? Like, that, I think if that's what helps them deal with the trauma that you must go through of, you know, being told that you have a terminal illness, if that's something that gives them hope and like makes them feel better in some sense, then like, where's the harm in that? I think the harm would come from it being like a knock-on effect for the family, like you mentioned earlier about, you know, if it gives false hope to the family. But then I think that's up to these individual companies to make it very clear to the family that like, this is not something that's probably going to happen within your lifetime. So like, this is goodbye for you. So I think as long as that's like made very clear to the individual's family as well, then I honestly don't really see the harm in it. I can't for me, I don't think anyone's paying for you in like 20-30 years, let alone hundreds and hundreds. And also, they pay this lifetime membership fee, but inflation, babe, you know, my bread is costing me like £5 now. If any of the listeners have any thoughts on this, or like you have any more insights into this, like you'll definitely have to let us know. Drop a comment, especially if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube. And if you're someone who's shy to drop comments, you don't normally like leaving a long comment, just leave us a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you would or would not do this, because we need your thoughts, because I'm so intrigued. But yeah, this was such a fun episode, Taz. Thank you so much. And for now, the episode is not over, because it's about time we get into our listener story for today's laboraTEA. So let's get into it. But I'm worth it, 'cause I'll slip into your dreams tonight. Okay, so this email says, my PhD supervisor's mission is to make all of his students cry within the first year. So it says, hi guys, I'm a final year PhD student, and a few months ago, my PI destroyed me mentally. To give you a bit of context, ever since I started my PhD, I have been in this extremely toxic lab where the PIs are happy to make their students cry. I quote from one of them, I will make all of my students cry within the first year. I always had very intense meetings with my supervisors, and for 2.5 years, I was crying during all of my meetings with them. Have you ever cried during a meeting?
No.
I don't think I have. I've been close, but not because my supervisors were arseholes, but because I was just like overwhelmed. So
yeah, I've usually like cried after, but like not in front of them. I cried many times during my PhD, don't get me wrong, but I've never cried in a meeting. Yeah.
Been there. I can't even tell you how many tears I shed over that fucking PhD. Anyway, it continues to say, the supervision is terrible, but my project is doing really great. In terms of science, this PhD was amazing, but the supervision made it horrible. I started to talk back to my PIs to stand up for myself and for my research, which was appreciated sometimes. I had very intense and humiliating meetings with the three of us, but also in front of the whole lab. Not great. By the way, so she did say that she had two PIs. So when she says with the three of us, I think she means like had humiliating meetings with her two PIs and then also in front of the whole lab group.
Right.
Now, a few months ago, I started to push to get feedback about my dissertation manuscript and the plan to submit it within my contract. And this is where the worst term of my PhD started. So, my main PI wanted me to do the extra experiment that was number one, not relevant for my manuscript, and number two, not feasible with the amount of time I had left. This is the universal experience of every PhD student, is that right before you leave, your supervisor is trying to squeeze the last parts of your soul out of you. Yeah, it's horrific. It's horrific. Like, I've heard this story so many times. So she says she explained to him why it was not possible, and they suggested for her to get an extension. I got harassed by them for years, so obviously I declined the offer, and he was not happy about it. He started to exclude me from the lab activity. In brackets, we had a 3 days lab seminar that I was not allowed to join anymore. He started to tell me how bad I was for a PhD student and that I should leave academia because no one would work with me as a postdoc. Can I just say, like, why do you want her to do an extension then? If she's so bad, why do you want her to extend? Make it make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Make it make sense.
This whole interaction breaks something in me. I have a few weeks left. I took the decision to leave this country ASAP. I didn't get any feedback from my dissertation and I'm not sure I'll get them. I don't want to destroy myself more because of this job, but a part of me wants to succeed and be done with it. I'm not sure I will ever graduate because of the non-existent support I get from my PIs. Do you have any suggestions on things I should do, try to do to make it on time? I already contacted the graduate school, but nothing can be done if I don't start an official complaint, and I'm afraid this will make the situation even worse. Woo! That's a lot. That's a lot.
Gosh.
There's a lot. First of all, I'm gonna just
feel
say,
like a lot of like responsibility on my shoulders right now.
Same. Okay, so let's break this down. So basically what I think the listener is asking is there, like, how should they get the feedback in on time so that they can meet their deadline and not have to extend? That's what I'm getting from this. Now, I'm gonna start by saying this, that my best friend, so I had a best friend during my PhD, as in, like, we both started our PhD at the same time. We ended up becoming like best friends, and her supervisor the whole way through her PhD was so on it. He was incredible. But basically, when it came to her like writing up and submitting her thesis, he literally ghosted her. And it was like the most bizarre thing ever. So she didn't, I mean, this is what she told me. I don't know how true it is, but I don't have any reason to think she's lying. But she told me that she sent him her thesis and he gave her zero feedback. And then she just had to submit without his feedback. Now, I know there are certain countries where you're actually not allowed to do that, but the UK is one country where you are actually allowed to submit your thesis without the approval of your supervisor. So if you're from the UK, you actually do not need approval from your supervisor and you can go ahead and submit. I know obviously you're going to want feedback, but I think it's worth weighing up, are they going to give you valuable, constructive feedback? And is it worth waiting around for? Or can you just submit it without them? Or is there another PI that you could go to for help and be like, hey, I haven't got much feedback. Like, do you think you could have a look over this for me before I submit it? But then obviously if you are not from the UK and you're from a country where you require approval, then I'm just going to go ahead and say that maybe the official complaint is going to be the best route to go down in order to get your feedback and get yourself out of there ASAP. Do you agree, Taz?
Yeah, I agree. It kind of feels like the damage has already been done. And if you have like records to show that you've been consistently asking for feedback on your thesis and you haven't heard anything, and it's getting to the point where it's gonna put you into an extension and you have to pay for an extension, then that is definitely not fair. So
no,
start the
but
formal
why
complaint
would
process.
if she's so bad and she's so awful and no one's going to want to hire her, why do you want to extend her contract? Why do you want her to do extra experiments?
They also just sound like awful supervisors. Like, imagine like actually admitting that you like to make your students cry. Like, that's
Yeah, sorry, we just glossed over
bizarre.
that. We really glossed over that. That is bizarre.
Yeah.
That's psychotic behavior. Like, and why what are you so proud about that for? Like,
Yeah,
that's
I don't
weird.
know. I don't understand like supervisors that have this like power trip at all, because at the end of the day, and I also don't understand supervisors that take such a back seat, because I actually think that your students are a reflection of you, and I actually think it's really
100%.
embarrassing if like you're churning out PhD students but like they're just scraping the barrel, or you're having to like send a disclaimer to be like, by the way, this student is like not up to par. Like, that's a reflection of you and your supervision a lot of the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't understand that logic at all, and I just think it's so detrimental. Like, if you give someone like the support that they need, obviously there's a level of like autonomy and onus that the student has to like do, but like if you don't give them enough guidance and they're just like falling below the bar, then like that's really a reflection on you. And do you really want that reputation? I just don't understand the logic personally. I don't understand the whole like toxic academia thing either. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I 100% agree, but it definitely sounds like he's on a power trip and is almost using it to squeeze as much as out of all of you as possible. It's like he knows that he's rubbish and he intends on being rubbish to almost like punish you guys into doing as much as you can for him. Do you know what I mean? That's
Mm.
why he's like, "Oh, you're so rubbish. No one's going to hire you as a postdoc, so you might as well just stay and extend and do this extra work that I want you to do." Because it's
For
like it's
like
less effort for
no
him
money.
to yeah, it's less effort for him to get you to do it. You're already there, you already understand the lab, you know everything, you know where everything is. Like, it's easier for you rather than him having to hire someone else, get new funding, get someone new in.
It's
So it
also
sounds like he's
free.
trying to, yeah, he's trying to like bully you and belittle you into feeling like this is your only option. But hopefully you're in the UK or a country where this is in fact not your only option. I mean, either way, it's not. But if you're in the UK, you just need to be like, nah, babes, I'm out. Because chances are you have done more than enough and you're going to be just fine. And I know several people who submitted their thesis without their supervisor's approval and they were fine. They passed
Yeah.
their Viva with minor corrections.
Also, what you can do is um send a request for comments and just say, look, I have to submit it by this day. If I don't receive your feedback by this day, then I will be submitting it as it is. And then just submit it as it is, because that will either give them a kick up the arse to actually give you feedback, or it gives you the authority just to do it anyway, and you have like email correspondence to say or to show that you asked for their feedback before your
Yeah.
end date of your PhD. So I think that's fine. If you obviously can't submit it without their approval, or like they submit it on your behalf or something, then just start the official complaints process, or at least give them a chance to respond. Just be like, I'm in a bit of a sticky situation here, I'm not hearing back from you, like the university have told me I have to go through this process if I'm going to get a free extension because I've not heard from you. So that is the next step that I'm going to have to take if I hear nothing back. And as long as you have like email correspondence to show all of this stuff, then like the ball's in their court, you know, like it's up to them whether they reply, and they can get in trouble if they don't.
Yeah. I agree. So hopefully some of that is useful, but yeah, also just sorry that you had like a shitty experience
Mm.
during your PhD. I mean, we hear it all the time on this podcast. It's unfortunately just way too common that people have awful experiences with
Yeah.
PIs, but I think it is worth like remembering that not every single PI like is like this, and I have had
Mm.
some amazing, really supportive PIs, and so
Yeah.
hopefully this doesn't put you off of academia completely. If academia is something that you want to pursue, just know that like although you do hear a lot of horror stories like this, I like to think that they are uncommon. I think it's just
Yeah.
like when we hear about them, you know what I mean, like
It's also
everybody has
like
a
obviously our podcast is, we want the laboratory, like we want the tea. So a lot of the
yeah
time it's has a negative connotation to it, and what you guys probably might not hear are the positive stories that people have from their PhDs. Like a lot of the time on our podcast it is going to be negative experiences and people asking for our advice, but like we know a lot of people who have PhDs and who have had very supportive supervisors. So it's
Yeah,
not
I
all
have
like
me, for
that, as a
example.
disclaimer. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, definitely worth remembering that this is not normal, and you are well within your rights to either go ahead and submit without them or make that official complaint, girl. Make it worse. Go for it. Like,
Do it.
cause a bit of chaos. Do you know what I mean? Go for it. They've caused chaos. It's your turn now. So yeah, although it's not going to cause chaos. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful. You'll definitely have to let us know how you get on. And girl, we want the pictures of you at your graduation, celebrating when this is finally done. And when this is done, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, what a time. What a time. Then you're going to be out of it. You're going to be flourishing and everything will be fine. We all go through situations like this at some point in our life and it sucks, but you will come out the other end and you'll feel way better. So yeah, and good luck with your submission. Good luck with your Viva. You're going to kill it and you'll join the doctor family.
And also, if you're listening and you feel like you have a similar story or a similar dilemma, then we'll always leave a link in the description. And obviously, if you're loving the podcast and you're loving season 7 so far, please drop us a comment, a follow, a like,
please,
all of the above if you want. But yeah, for now, that wraps up, and we will see you guys next week. Bye everyone.